You expect a harvest before the seeds have even cracked the soil. Your primitive brain doesn't understand exponential growth. It only understands immediate reward, and that biological flaw is exactly why you're about to quit. I watch them, always the same tired, anxious faces reflected in the cold blue light of their monitors. Whether it's a cramped, overpriced studio in Brooklyn or a lonely basement office in suburban Seattle. They have meticulously followed the gurus, consumed the courses, and executed the protocol of content creation. Yet, 3 months in, the analytics are flat. The revenue ledger is a barren wasteland, and the dopamine hit they were promised is nowhere to be found. The result is the inevitable, sickening realization. The universe did not instantly reward their effort. They confuse activity with progress, volume with velocity. It is an infantile tantrum disguised as entrepreneurial spirit. They believe in digital alchemy, that typing words into a screen should instantly transmute into gold, because their entire mental architecture has been corrupted by the slot machine pull of modern technology. The frustration bubbling up in your chest, that tight knot of existential dread you feel when you check the metrics for the 10th time today, is not a moral failing. It is a biological inevitability. You are running a sophisticated, long-term strategic game, but your ancient hardware is demanding the immediate, visceral gratification of a successful hunt. The conflict is a brutal, internal civil war, fought daily between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, PFC. The limbic system, the ancient beast, the architect of survival and immediate pleasure, operates on a simple, brutal economy. Did I eat today? Did I find shelter? Did I secure the immediate resource? In the context of your online endeavor, the immediate resource translates to instant views, rapid sales, and the electric ping of a notification confirming external validation. This system evolved over millennia when the gap between effort and reward was measured in minutes or hours, not fiscal quarters. If the effort expended on tracking a gazelle did not yield meat within a necessary window, the organism starved. The brain learned to prioritize the short-term win because the long-term future was frequently fatal. Now, you apply that same wiring to building a sustainable SaaS company, a robust content library, or a high-ticket coaching practice. You spend 40 hours building a complex sales funnel or writing a deeply researched evergreen article that will not yield significant ROI for 9 months. The limbic system registers this as catastrophic failure. It sees 40 hours of high-effort labor and 0 immediate caloric intake. It screams, "Stop! This is not working. Retreat to the known low-effort path." This is the agonizing inertia of the starting line. You are pressing against a colossal mass of resistance, the inherent friction of the market, the slow algorithmic indexing, and the sheer volume of noise you must cut through. During this invisible accumulation phase, your brain is not merely failing to receive a reward, it is actively punishing you for the perceived waste of energy. The neurochemistry confirms this internal sabotage. When you post a brilliant piece of content and receive 0 comments, the expected surge of dopamine, the progress molecule, is aborted. Instead, the brain might release cortisol, the stress hormone associated with threat and failure. This is the biological mechanism that translates into the thought, "I should just quit and watch Netflix." Netflix offers a guaranteed low-effort dopamine hit. The brain, prioritizing energy conservation and immediate pleasure, calculates the cost-benefit analysis and pushes you toward the couch. The long-term business plan, requiring sustained PFC engagement, is dismissed as an inefficient energy sink. The modern online economy operates on the principle of exponential growth, but the human mind is wired for linearity. We expect the effort curve and the results curve to be identical. 1 unit of work equals 1 unit of reward. The truth, however, is that in the initial stages of any serious venture, 100 units of work yield 0.1 units of reward. This is the valley of despair that separates the casual dreamer from the serious builder. I have observed countless individuals, bright, capable, and well-funded, succumb to this chronological myopia. They look at the successful entrepreneur, Sarah from San Diego, who is now selling 10K courses, and fail to calculate the invisible history. They see the harvest, but they refuse to acknowledge the 4 years Sarah spent meticulously watering the seeds, weeding the soil, and enduring the silent, agonizing wait. This waiting period, this blindagem against immediacy, is not merely a test of patience. It is a neurological reprogramming exercise. The PFC, nestled right behind your forehead, is the seat of executive function, abstract thought, and delayed gratification. It is the only part of your brain capable of understanding compound interest, long-term brand equity, and the strategic necessity of doing tedious, unrewarding work now for a disproportionate payoff later. But the PFC is expensive. It burns glucose at an alarming rate, demanding discipline and mental resources. When you are fatigued, stressed, or underslept, the PFC is the first structure to go offline. The limbic system, operating on ancient, robust circuits, immediately takes the reins, demanding comfort and ease. This is why the urge to abandon your complex business strategy for a quick, guaranteed payout, like chasing the latest viral social media fad or engaging in impulsive retail therapy, becomes overwhelming precisely when you are most overworked. You must accept a cold, hard truth. The effort required to build a solid foundation is inherently unglamorous and biologically unrewarding in the short term. You are not meant to feel good while you are laying the invisible pipes beneath the city streets. The feeling of success is reserved for the moment the water finally flows, months or years later. Your primary obstacle is not the algorithm, the competition, or market saturation. Your primary obstacle is the ancient, whining voice inside your head, demanding a cookie now. To survive the invisible accumulation phase, you must formalize a protocol that bypasses the emotional circuitry entirely. You cannot rely on motivation, because motivation is merely the shadow of immediate dopamine reward. When the reward vanishes, so does the motivation. Instead, you must install an external system of structure and commitment that dictates your actions regardless of your feelings. Consider the architecture of a skyscraper. The foundation requires immense, unseen labor, poured concrete, deep pilings, subterranean reinforcements. No one applauds the foundation. It is dirty, slow, and expensive. But without that deep, unglamorous work, the structure designed for exponential height will collapse under its own weight. Your first year in business is the foundation. It is the time when you produce content that few people see, when you build systems that few people use, and when you develop skills that are not yet sharp enough to command high prices. This is the necessary suffering, the logotherapy, of the entrepreneur. The meaning is not in the immediate gain, but in the deliberate construction of a future self capable of handling the success you seek. If you are waiting for the feeling of congruence, that perfect alignment where effort feels intrinsically rewarding, before you commit to the grind, you will wait forever. Congruence is not a starting state, it is a resulting state, earned through the consistent application of effort against the biological desire for instant ease. We must dissect this impatience further, examining how the brain's insistence on linear causality, A leads immediately to B, blinds you to the power of compounding effort, which follows the pattern. A plus, A plus, A plus A leads to B x 100. This is the difference between a savings account and a nuclear reaction, and understanding the neurobiological friction of that transition is the only thing that will keep you from hitting the abort button. We must teach the PFC to starve the limbic system just enough to maintain the long-term vision. I observe this phenomenon daily. The digital landscape is cluttered with the wreckage of shattered expectations. People invest $500 in a course, spend 2 weeks posting mediocre content, and then declare the entire enterprise a catastrophic failure because their bank account did not spontaneously combust into 7 figures. They mistake the first 1% of the journey, the linear, painful segment, for the whole map. This is not disappointment, it is intellectual laziness dressed up as defeat. You wouldn't plant an oak sapling and then dig it up weekly to check if the root system had achieved market dominance. Why do you treat your rates arquitatura mental with less respect than a tree? The root of this catastrophic impatience lies in the primitive calculus of the mesolimbic pathway. Dopamine, the currency of effort, is not released primarily for the reward itself, but for the anticipation of the reward, and crucially, for the prediction error. If you expect to publish an article and receive 5 views, and you receive 5 views, the dopamine release is negligible. The outcome is perfectly predicted. If you expect 5 views and receive 50,000, the system floods, reinforcing the action sequence and shouting, "Do that again!" immediately. The slow, grinding accumulation phase of an online business where you produce 5 articles and gain 2 subscribers provides 0 prediction error. The output is precisely congruent with the minimal predictable input, rendering the effort biologically silent. Your ancient brain interprets this silence not as stable, foundational progress, but as behavioral futility. It screams, "Abort!" The caloric expenditure is unsustainable for this meager, predictable return. This lack of immediate, erratic success ensures the rapid extinction of the behavior, triggering a profound sense of, inertia. The system prefers a predictable, small reward, now. Scrolling social media, consuming instead of producing low-effort tasks over an unpredictable, large reward later. The limbic system is, by design, terrible at probabilistic reasoning regarding the distant future. It operates on the logic of the immediate savanna. If the berry bush yields fruit now, we stay. If we have to cross a desert for a theoretical oasis, we die. We must visualize the growth curve not as a straight line ascending gently towards the heavens, but as the infamous J-curve. For the first 18 to 24 months, the line is deceptively flat, hugging the x-axis. You are pouring energy, time, money, psychological capital into a void. The effort cost is high, the visible payoff is near 0. This flat expanse is what I call the valley of invisible leverage. Every piece of content, every system built, every customer interaction, every skill honed is generating leverage, but it remains latent, unobservable. The energy is stored like water behind a dam. The limbic system, which only understands linear equations, A leads to B, looks at this flat line and registers catastrophic failure. It demands a pivot, a new shiny object, anything to escape the psychological pain of effort that yields no immediate tangible signal. This is the precise moment when 92% of new ventures collapse. They crash not because the market was saturated or the strategy was flawed, but because the CEO, you, could not tolerate the cognitive dissonance between the perceived effort and the observed result. They quit 1 millimeter before the curve begins its exponential vertical ascent. They sought the immediate dopamine hit of a new, unproven strategy, rather than enduring the silent discipline required to activate the latent leverage they had already accumulated. The failure to achieve immediate congruence. That feeling where the work itself feels naturally rewarding is the primary killer of long-term projects. As I've stated before, congruence is not a prerequisite. It is a dividend paid out only after sustained, unrewarded effort. You must earn the right to enjoy the work. To survive this initial phase, you must formalize the Kaiser protocol of persistence, treating it as a neurobiological hack. The only way to traverse the valley of invisible leverage is by constructing an external scaffolding that renders the immediate emotional state irrelevant. This is the disciplined application of Viktor Frankl's insight. When you cannot change the situation, the slow, unrewarding growth, you are challenged to change yourself, your internal response to that growth. You must treat your business activities not as choices driven by motivation, but as non-negotiable assignments dictated by the higher court of your prefrontal cortex. If your goal is merely to be rich, the limbic system can easily offer a shortcut: gambling, chasing viral trends, impulsive spending. That goal is too shallow to sustain the weight of 2 years of invisible labor. If, however, your goal is to construct a scalable system that provides genuine value, independence, and a testament to your own arquitectura mental, a cathedral built brick by painful brick, then the tedious daily tasks acquire a weight of meaning that transcends immediate dopamine deficits. You are not just writing a newsletter. You are laying a brick in the foundation of your future freedom. This foundational meaning provides the necessary blindagem against the ephemeral desires of the moment. We must understand that the PFC, while capable of strategic, long-term thinking, is a fragile structure. It requires high energy and optimal conditions. The limbic system is robust, always running, always demanding. To enforce the protocol of long-term growth, you must surgically reduce the opportunities for the limbic system to derail the mission. This means optimizing the environment so that the default choice is the disciplined one. Consider the concept of inertia, not merely as psychological resistance, but as a physical law applied to behavior. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. The greatest energy expenditure is required to initiate movement, to overcome the initial frictional resistance. Once momentum is achieved, maintaining it requires significantly less effort. Your initial business phase is characterized by maximum friction. You are learning new skills, the market is indifferent, and your brain is fighting the lack of reward. Every single action requires a conscious, exhausting override of the default low-effort path. The solution is to minimize the friction of starting. Jordan Peterson speaks of organizing your territory, cleaning your room, establishing micro-order. In the context of the digital entrepreneur, this translates to establishing an environment where the path of least resistance leads directly to the high-leverage task. If your protocol truck states that you must write for 2 hours every morning, but your phone is next to your keyboard, notifications are active, and your email is open, you have engineered failure. You have placed the low-effort, high-dopamine distraction directly in the path of the high-effort, low-dopamine necessity. The PFC, already depleted by the high cognitive load of complex strategy, cannot win this fight repeatedly. It relies on systems, not willpower. Therefore, the practical solution is the preemptive elimination of choice. The protocol must dictate the environment. If the task is writing, the environment must be sterile. The phone in a separate room, the internet access severed, the desk clear of anything that promises immediate, shallow engagement. This is not a matter of being more disciplined. It is a matter of acknowledging the biological fragility of high-level cognition and building a cage for the impulsive self. We are not aiming for motivational ecstasy. We are aiming for mechanical, cold execution. Andrew Huberman details how specific behaviors, exposure to cold, intense exercise, structured task initiation, can release norepinephrine, which enhances focus and allows the PFC to operate more effectively. These are not motivational tricks. They are neurochemical levers. You use them to achieve a temporary surgical increase in executive function, just long enough to initiate the high-friction task. Once movement begins, once the behavioral inertia is overcome, the task becomes easier to sustain, even without immediate reward. The entire first year is a systematic training regimen designed to teach your brain that action precedes feeling, that effort is often divorced from immediate reward, and that the greatest payoffs are delayed. You are not building a business. You are building a new brain that is capable of sustaining a business. The irony is that the moment you stop obsessing over the results, the metrics, the views, the revenue figures, and focus exclusively on the rigid adherence to the high-leverage input protocol, the results begin to accelerate. Why? Because when the fixation on immediate outcome vanishes, the stress response that depletes the PFC also diminishes. You are no longer engaging in a high-stakes daily evaluation. You are simply executing a checklist. This reduction in emotional load frees up the cognitive resources necessary for deep work, strategy refinement, and genuine creativity. The limbic system is starved of the emotional drama it craves. This transition, from emotional execution based on immediate feedback to mechanical execution based on predetermined protocol, is the crucial pivot point where the flat line of the J-curve begins its inevitable ascent. You stop waiting for the feeling of pause congruence cow to arrive and instead force the action, trusting that the feeling will follow the sustained effort months down the line. We must now define the specific components of this mandatory on-protocol, detailing how to structure the first 90 minutes of the day to ensure high-leverage tasks are executed before the inevitable cognitive fatigue sets in, blinding the PFC and handing control back to the ancient, demanding circuits of the immediate self. We must now define the specific components of this mandatory Kayamani protocol, detailing how to structure the first 90 minutes of the day to ensure high-leverage tasks are executed before the inevitable cognitive fatigue sets in, blinding the PFC and handing control back to the ancient, demanding circuits of the immediate self. The first 90 minutes are not a suggestion. They are a neurochemical necessity. This window, immediately following the period of highest natural cortisol release, represents the pinnacle of available executive function. It is a fragile, finite resource, and to waste it on checking email or scrolling through the performance metrics of the previous day is an act of self-sabotage so profound it borders on the grotesque. We call this phase the blindagem, the shielding protocol. The goal of the blindagem is to create cognitive sterility. You are performing surgery on your business, and the environment must be scrubbed clean of contaminants. The Yataichi protocol begins the night before. You must define, with surgical precision, the single, highest leverage task for the morning. This cannot be a vague concept like write, but a specific, measurable unit. Draft the first 1,000 words of the sales page, or develop the database schema for the new product architecture. Upon waking, the sequence is inviolable. The phone remains in its segregated charging station, preferably outside the bedroom, certainly outside the workspace. The first moments are dedicated not to input, but to activation. A brief, sharp exposure to cold, a 60-second cold shower or face plunge, followed by structured movement. This is not for physical fitness. This is a controlled neurochemical intervention. The sudden release of norepinephrine functions as a powerful, non-addictive mental stimulant, sharpening the focus and temporarily increasing the operational budget of the PFC. The moment you sit down, the protocol mandates immediate, zero-friction entry into the high-leverage task. The file must be open, the tools ready, the environment sterilized. This is where the concept of preemptive elimination of choice reaches its zenith. You are not debating what to do. You are merely executing the pre-written script. For 90 consecutive minutes, the world outside your task does not exist. The internet connection, unless strictly required for the task and verified to be only for that specific resource, must be severed. Notifications are not merely silenced, they are physically inaccessible. This rigid enforcement of isolation protects your finite pool of attentional resources from the endless, shallow demands of the digital collective. Anyone who has attempted to build substantial wealth online knows the dark humor inherent in the phrase, passive income. The income may eventually become passive, but the initial creation process is aggressively active, demanding a level of focused, sustained effort that most modern brains, addicted to the intermittent reward schedule of social media, find unbearable. The childish whimpering of the immediate self demands proof of effort. Where is the money? Where are the likes? Why am I not a guru after 3 weeks? This impatience is not merely an emotional flaw. It is a direct consequence of the limbic system's tyranny. It has been trained since infancy, by the microtransactions of instant communication and entertainment, that effort must equal immediate, quantifiable feedback. When the PFC attempts to engage in complex, non-linear strategic work where the reward is delayed by 6 months or a year, the limbic system interprets the silence as failure, danger, or irrelevance. It screams for distraction, for the low-hanging fruit of email response or metric checking, simply to generate a small, immediate squirt of dopamine that confirms, I am doing something useful right now. This is why most online ventures fail, not due to poor strategy, but due to insufficient psychological blindagem. People mistake motion for progress. They spend their freshest 90 minutes engaging in administrative triage, email, social media management, designing a logo, tasks that feel productive but generate zero long-term leverage. These tasks are merely self-soothing behaviors, dopamine hits that allow the individual to claim they worked hard while circumventing the high cognitive load required for true creation. The mentor sombrio finds this spectacle profoundly disappointing. We are living in an era where the tools for global reach are cheap and accessible, yet the internal architecture mental required to sustain the effort remains weak, soft, and uncalibrated to the reality of non-linear growth. The execution of the protocol is the only antidote to this psychological decay. It is the ritualistic imposition of order onto the chaotic demand for instant gratification. After the 90 minutes are complete, and only then, you can afford the cognitive luxury of reviewing the landscape. You may check the metrics, you may respond to the most critical communications, but the high-leverage input is already locked in. The day is fundamentally a success, regardless of the feedback received. This realization that your worth and progress are tied to your input adherence, not the chaotic variability of market output, is the pivot point of psychological maturity. This sustained adherence, this cold mechanical execution, is what creates the true internal feeling of congruence. Congruence is often misunderstood. It is not the feeling of harmonious alignment before the work begins. It is the deep, quiet satisfaction that settles into the soul after the mandatory, difficult work has been completed, knowing that you upheld your own highest standards, irrespective of external noise. It is the internal validation that renders external validation optional. Viktor Frankl, observing the stark reality of survival, understood that meaning was found not in happiness or immediate comfort, but in the adherence to a self-defined purpose, even amidst immense suffering and delayed reward. For the digital architect, the suffering is the psychological pain of the flatline, the relentless indifference of the market, and the constant internal battle against the demand for ease. The purpose is the unwavering commitment to the Requadron protocol. When you operate this way, when you treat your time and cognitive energy as a scarce, sacred resource protected by the race blindagem, something critical happens to your perception of time. The focus shifts entirely from the outcome, which you cannot control, to the system, which you control absolutely. You stop asking, "When will I be rich?" and start asking, "Did I execute the protocol today?" The answer to the first question is unknowable and anxiety-inducing, activating the limbic system's alarm bells. The answer to the second is binary, immediate, and empowering, strengthening the PFC's control. The J-curve is not a pleasant trajectory. It is an act of brutal, non-linear accumulation. Imagine pushing a massive boulder up an impossibly long, slight incline. For months, the effort required is staggering, the visual progress negligible. Every single day, you overcome maximum inertia. The boulder feels immovable. Your brain, wired for immediate visual confirmation, screams that the effort is futile. Then, at some invisible, critical inflection point, after the required mass of content, connections, and system optimization has been achieved, the incline suddenly transforms into a precipitous drop. The output begins to accelerate, not linearly, but exponentially. The compounding effect, once merely a theoretical concept, becomes a violent reality. The market, which previously ignored your existence, suddenly treats your presence as an established gravity well. This sudden acceleration is not a reward for waiting. It is the inevitable consequence of the sustained protocol that taught your ancient brain to tolerate the void of delayed gratification. You did not succeed because you were patient. You succeeded because you engineered an architecture mental bow that was impervious to the biological demand for impatience. The ultimate tragedy is that most people quit precisely at the moment they have accumulated 80% of the necessary hidden mass. They stop pushing the boulder just before the crest. They mistake the accumulated inertia, the intense effort required to maintain velocity on the flat line, for failure. The mentor. Sombrio offers no platitudes about light or happiness. The path of high-leverage creation is dark, demanding, and often lonely. But the reward is not merely financial. The reward is the forged self, a mind restructured, disciplined, and capable of operating in the cold vacuum of delayed reward. You are not fighting the market. You are fighting the ancient, demanding creature housed within your own skull. Win that fight, enforce the Krauss protocol, and the world will eventually yield to the sheer mechanical force of your sustained, focused input. The slow, invisible growth is not a sign of failure. It is the only true foundation for an inevitable, brutal, and non-linear ascent. Execute the blindagem law and let the metrics be damned until they are forced to obey the gravity of your sustained effort.